For Deadlock fans, the 4th of July celebration is only just beginning, because Valve have given us a huge hotfix update. Shipped to the client only a few hours ago, there is a magnitude of changes with some really meta-defining updates. We'll go through it and have a look at some of the more interesting bits and pieces, starting off of course with the global nerfs that we've seen to guns. Many heroes have had their bullet damage reduced, but there was one key piece of the patch notes, a global nerf to cycle time. Now, worded as a reduction of 5% DPS on average, this is your bullet cycle time for all heroes being increased by 5%. Now, to give you some context as for what that means, it's not necessarily rate of fire. In fact, it's a combination of a couple of things that add up to why you're going to be doing reduced DPS. I've got a before and after comparison here of just raw rate of fire, the side by side. On the left, of course, is pre-patch, on the right is post-patch. You can see it's almost negligible that there is any difference between how it was previously to after the update when it comes to just regular rate of fire. There are some exceptions to this. Heroes with burst fire weapons do seem to have been affected to a slightly bigger degree. You can notice it with Seven or Lash, characters like that that have a gun that does stagger in terms of its downtime between its bursts. However, cycle time affects a couple other things as well. It can be involved in when you interrupt your bullet cycle. So if you dash or melee, this will pause the artificial cycle time and then reset it. So you'll have to wait slightly longer until that has caught up for your next bullet to leave the chamber. As you can see, it's a little bit of a weird one to wrap your head around, and it was sending me west comparing all the before and after footage, taking it at face value that Valve meant that they had just changed the rate of fire for heroes that would reduce the output of DPS by around 5% on average. So a little bit to dig into there, definitely worth playing around with your favourite heroes and seeing how it's affected you. However, no matter what heroes you enjoy playing, this change will affect you. Valve have changed the global ultimate cooldown and increased it by an extra 10%, meaning every hero in the game will now have 10% added onto their ultimate cooldown timer. Of course, this means if you play a hero like Paradox, it won't be that bad. The increase will only be a few seconds, so marginal at best. But for Dynamo, Lash, heroes of a large stature when it comes to their cooldown, it's really going to compound and be quite the difference, meaning using those ultimates is now going to be far more risk versus reward. I don't know if a blanket increase of cooldowns is the right way to go about this, but it's the decision Valve have made, so we'll see how it feels inside of this patch. Something similar they've done as well is tweak ability damage, effectively globally reducing it for every hero in the game as well. There is some exceptions to this that I'll explain, but all abilities based damage and AP bonus damage has been reduced by 8% across the board, so everyone's going to be affected by these changes. You may notice games of Deadlock feeling a little bit different, of course, whilst you adapt to this. You've got to factor in the guns feeling slightly different with reduced DPS, abilities dealing slightly less damage. Alongside that, of course, ultimates taking longer to cast as well with that increased cooldown, but you will at least be happy to know that spirit power growth will be unaffected by this. So abilities that scale off spirit will still be doing the regular amount of damage when it comes to their growth over the course of a game, but the base is reduced by 8%. That is only the tip of the iceberg for today's hotfix, so let's kick off Patch Notice and delve into the nitty-gritty of just what Valve have done. Of course, this is the 4th of July update for Deadlock, the 1-year anniversary for Patch Notice as well. The first episode was released back on the 4th of July before the game was even allowed to be discussed in the public, but now we can talk about all these changes. So let's get into it. Up first, hero changes. We'll kick things off with Detective Abrams himself, as there's been a couple of minor buffs for him inside of this patch. Two of Abrams' abilities were targeted in this update, namely Shoulder Charge being the first. The cooldown was increased from minus 18 seconds to minus 22 seconds on his tier 3 upgrade. Now, in reality, of course, that's just a nice little buff there. A few extra seconds off the top, making it quicker and easier to throw out those shoulder charges, being rewarded for a max skill point investment. Not bad. Similarly, the other change was Infernal Resilience, with its tier 3 going up by plus 1%, from 6 to 7, which isn't that bad at all. I mean, you're now looking at an additional percentage, so up to 7% of your damage that's going to be deferred there. This sounds great. Ideal times to be an Abrams main. So if you're out there punching people with that big old book, you're probably going to be having an even easier time of it. Not bad buffs. Really overall quite minor for what they are, but this is only the beginning. So let's crash down and move on over to see what else is going to be heating up the meta going into this new update. And of course, I'm talking about what they've changed on Infernus. Now, for Infernus, it's quite interesting actually, as there is numerous sets of changes here. You've initially got the tweaks that come in the form of bullet damage growth per boon being reduced from 0.16 to 0.12. That is quite a substantial difference, even if it doesn't sound like that much. Of course, the values there will have an effect over the course of the game, and that growth of his damage, just being able to deal more and more damage over the course of gaining those boons, leveling up, isn't going to compound as quickly as it did previously. In a similar vein, the afterburn DPS itself has been reduced by 13%, and this still is affected by the global base reduction, so that other 8% I mentioned during the intro. So the total amount of damage that this has had wiped off it is actually pretty substantial. When you think about adding all those numbers up, that's over 20% of its damage being removed from afterburn, which really is going to slow you down from ripping people to shreds as Infernus in the Cursed Apple. Kind of crazy. We'll see how that one feels when we get to delve into it more over the course of this meta. Obviously, Infernus has been a hero that is hugely viable, not only in public play, but in competitive Deadlock esports as well. There is one slight benefit, I guess, that his Afterburn Spirit scaling has been increased from 0.56 to 0.66, but I don't know if that's going to make much of a difference with just how much of a nerf that is. Flame Dash has had a few adjustments as well. Its tier 2 DPS has gone down by 10%, so again, they're pretty big kick in the teeth there for just burning your way through everyone in lane, or being able to rip people to shreds by just using that Flame Dash to zone people out. Although, again, in a similar vein, they have given you the ability to increase it with further spirit power scaling, going up from 0.7 to 0.8. So swings and roundabouts for Infernus, but obviously a lot more of a swing when it comes to the nerfed category. Like I said, we'll see if he can bounce back or how people are going to start building him now with these adjustments coming in. Will we see such a meta-dominant Infernus this time around? Maybe not. Maybe not. But let's drop down and see what's happening in the depths below, as of course Infernus isn't the only hero that's received some tweaks. Again, continuing on with the trend of bullet growth, it's Ivy on our screens. And we know just how much of a pain her gun can be in the right hands. Valve have decided to target that a little bit this time around. Continuing on from what we saw of a couple of the other heroes, they have reduced her bullet growth, going down from 0.16 to 0.15, but that's only really the tip of the iceberg. As much as that's going to be minorly frustrating for all those Ivy mains out there having that reduced bullet growth over the course of the game that isn't going to elevate you as quickly, it's more this change that I think is quite frustrating on top of it. It's the fact that from now on, Ivy will no longer ignore the shooting speed penalty. If you didn't know, Ivy was able to run at full speed, as you can see on the left-hand side, spraying her gun without a care in the world. It wouldn't slow her down as it does with nigh on every hero in Deadlock's roster. On the right, you can see how much slower it now is with the added slow-mo for a bit of emphasis there. The only blessing is, of course, they've made it so that Watcher's Covenant will now give this back to you. So as much as you don't have it available at base, constantly being able to sprint forward and shoot with no sprinting penalty, You can get it back, you just have to be using Watcher's Covenant, and it will also apply to any teammates that are tethered as well. So for the Gun Ivy mains out there, or generally anyone that enjoys playing the hero, it might be a little bit harder for you to dive in, deal some damage, and make out like some sort of stone-based bandit. Now, let's move on though and have a look at the one change Valve have made to Kelvin. Usually when Kelvin pops up, it's either an outrageous nerf or an outrageous buff. Kind of just feels the weird way it goes with him. He's quite polarizing, like the ice caps. Anyway, let's have a look at what they've done this time around, as I'm actually quite a big fan of this change. It involves the soul urn, namely the fact that he will no longer be able to take soul urns and claim them for free by using Frozen Shelter. Now, Kelvin, of course, I believe back in towards September of 2024, was changed so that his ultimate would block any objectives from working. It would freeze the rejuvenator in place, freeze objectives in place so that you couldn't deal damage to them, and that should have meant it would also stop objectives like the soul urn, but it didn't. For some reason, he was able to claim free urns all the way up till today. But the 4th of July 2025, it's over, Kelvin mains. No more free urn steals for you. And I'm really happy about this one. I think if your ultimate freezes all objectives, then it should freeze all objectives. And the fact he could get away with just stealing urns for free gave it far too much credence in being able to control the sole leader net worth of games. Glad to see that one gone, but watch out because he can still use teleporters. For some reason, he's allowed to TP even when it's frozen. So let's move over to Lady Geist and see what this ice-cold dame has been up to in the latest patch. We'll slide in and check out what Valve have sprinkled into this one. Again, following on, you've probably got the trend of this hotfix, a lot of focus on gun-based damage. It's the same here for Geist as well, but we'll break it down a little bit as there's some nuance, and of course there's some other changes that precede it as well. For Geist, rather than it being bullet growth, it's actually just the base bullet damage that's been flat reduced here. It's gone down by 2 points of damage from 23 to 21 on Johann's gift. So that revolver that usually cracks you in the face very early in lane will be dealing slightly less damage from the get-go now. We'll see how that feels and if it is a major nerf, but obviously it is a bit of a reduction and should be felt. Essence Bomb has also had quite a substantial change here. Again, I know the values don't look that crazy, and even in the side-by-sides you'll see that there's still some leeway. It doesn't feel like a huge amount of time that's been added on top, but they've added additional arming time to the bomb, so it will take longer to explode after landing on its target. That's what that means. So if you throw it down, it lands on a player or it lands on the floor, the time from when it finally hits the ground and begins its arming to exploding is now slightly longer, going up of course from 0.5 seconds to 0.65. There is a difference, it just doesn't feel that crazy, it just gives you a smaller window to dive out the way if there's an essence bomb coming towards you. Now, they've played around with malice an awful lot in this update as well, increasing the health cost to use it from 6% to 7%, so a bit more expensive at the cost of your own blood to throw out that malice, and then they've played around with the idea of messing around with how you're getting those blood shards, not giving you as many initially, but rather giving you a slightly larger damage amp, and slightly less blood shards to throw out, so something to be aware of there. Soul Exchange, of course, also has received another reduction in range. Remember, it went down to 6 meters in the last hotfix, now we're down to 5.5 meters, so Valve really encouraging you to get right in someone's face to steal their HP away. But let's move away from Geist and get on to Jacob Lash. We'll see what Valve have done to the world's biggest arsehole, Jacob Lash himself. A couple of tweaks in this one. It's surprising to see what they've done, but I'll guide you through it as it's not that drastic, but there are a couple of nerfs for the Lash. Firstly, Flog's cast range has been reduced by 5 meters. That's going to be going down from 25 to 20. So it lines up perfectly, of course, with the range finder that you can display in game by holding the Alt key. Again, if you're not using this to get a general gist of what your ability ranges are, it's a really useful tool that's built into the game, so you might as well start incorporating it when playing around in sandbox or testing, but that should give you more of an idea of just how much range you're now limited by when attempting to flog someone. And of course, there's been a bit of a change to the old dive strike as well. The scaling on damage from height has been adjusted on this, so that's going to be down from 3.3 meters to 3 meters on ground strikes damage height. But the changes don't stop there, so let's grab Paradox in our Death Slam and launch her into the focus of this video, as there's been one minor, well, I'd say minor, adjustment for Paradox. We can put it under the microscope and see just exactly what Valve have done here, as I have cooked up a nice little side-by-side for this one, as again, it is more of a visual change for Paradox. Listed in the notes as gun recoil adjustments to make it smoother, I assume what Valve meant is that they've just toned down the recoil and visual lurch when shooting the burst fire gun that Paradox has. You can see on the side-by-side here that it's not as aggressive when following each of the bullets slowly upwards. On the before footage, you see the camera gets dragged up a little bit and the recoil is going slightly higher, covering the entirety of the little box here on the poster. Whereas on the right, it doesn't move anywhere near as much. So a bit of a change there for gameplay and visual. But let's swap off Paradox and get our focus on mcginnis, everyone's favorite engineer in the cursed apple. Quite a few changes for mcginnis, actually. I was excited to see this, as there's a few really good buffs here. We'll start off with one of them. Heavy Barrage has had a DPS increase of 6%. I suppose trying to keep it competitive with, of course, the ult increase and even that global ability damage reduction that was mixed in. So it still cuts a little bit ahead of the pack now. That's going to be a nice one for the mcginnis mains. These turret changes, though, are fantastic. They've fixed a whole load of issues where the turrets couldn't target players that were on the ground after they had been stunned or while sliding. That's a crazy amount of DPS you've probably been missing out on. Not only that, they've even given you additional health per boon, going up from 52 to 56. That's quite the leap of additional HP per level up now. So shout out to the 5 big boons from the patron for that one. You can also see the substantial difference of the medicinal spectre. Love this change. It feels so much snappier. I don't know how we've lived with the older style for so long. Throwing this out in game yourself, you'll instantly notice the difference. It comes out far quicker, has a way better visual cue, and just feels overall incredibly improved from the older medicinal scepter that we've had for so long. So perhaps all the mcginnis mains out there have finally found a mcginnis balance oasis. Or is it just a Mirage? Because Mirage is up next, featuring 2 interesting changes. One of them just being a bug fix, and the other quite a substantial tweak. Let's have a look what Valve have done. Jin's Mark is mostly the focus of the update for Mirage, and what they've done here is add a range limit, so you can no longer apply stacks to enemies that are outside of a 45 meter radius. For context, I've set up a bit of a testing arena here on mid lane, and I'm showing you that you have to get quite close now. Of course, 45 meters within range of the target. Weirdly though, you can see with this clip where I'm shooting at the Abrams that's up by the bounce pad by the Baroness, if I get him within 45 meters and apply 1 stack, even if I get outside of the 45 meter radius, I can still apply more stacks. So maybe a bit of a bug there or a weird game mechanic for how it works. Otherwise, you get a rough idea of just how much leeway you have when it comes to fighting common angles on mid lane if controlling the bridge and playing off the high ground, looking to apply those Jin's Mark stacks. It's not actually that bad of a nerf, honestly, with all things considered. You can still see that you can get a lot of damage output out. You just can't harass from half the map away. That is, of course, unless you're 7 and you're up in the sky with the storm cloud ruining everyone like some kind of Zeus. Right, let's have a look what Valve have done to balance this, because of course, Stormcloud is always such a problematic ultimate. It feels like every update there's something that's got to be changed about it. A new gameplay mechanic, or in this case, just a flat DPS reduction. It's gone down by 10%, so say goodbye to 10% of your damage from Stormcloud, and another 8% on top of that. Oh yeah, and the cooldown's now way longer, so unlucky 7 mains. Let's move over to someone else that tends to bully in lane. It's Sinclair. Now, for Sinclair, there's a mixture of changes. Again, the classic for this update, base bullet damage has been reduced from 20 to 17. So Valve continue with this trend of trying to restructure and potentially just rebalance how strong guns are in the current meta, as it always feels like everyone's got a problem with the gun meta and the rise of gun builds. Really, in cycles, it's kind of been that way for a year now in Deadlock, which is quite funny. But you can put down your gun is dead banners for now and focus on the other changes, as these ones are actually quite nice. They've rebalanced Rabbit Hex somewhat, reducing the cast range from 30 meters to 24, and also changing the detonation delay, upping that from 0.7 to 0.9, giving you more time to get away, alongside increasing the movement speed when you are a rabbit from 22% to 36%. So you're a bit quicker and could hopefully avoid the massive fist of Sinclair that's trying to punch you in the face when you're being a little rabbit. Let's move on to the assistant though. Just one change here. You can no longer teleport back to assistant when silenced or cursed. Fair enough. It was very ridiculous just how much you could get away with playing chaotic Sinclair gameplay, really, where you're throwing down the assistant and diving the base with not a care in the world. So from one assistant to one gambler, it's time to talk about Wraith. Of course, Gun Wraith died. Last patch, she got a huge hit straight to the gun barrel. But cards, they're on the up and up. Spirit scaling's gone up. That slow at tier 3 they added has gone up. They're giving you more reason to build hybrid, Spirit, Wraith, focus on the card trick. Arguably the funner part of her kit. Yes, her gun might be in the bin right now. Thus, everyone else is too, it seems. So maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. But Spirit Wraith is in the building, and those cards can be potent, so I advise you to get out there and play around with your builds, keeping that in mind. That slow really does affect you. But that's enough about Wraith, so let's dip out, throw the cloak, jump onto Pocket, and see just what has been changed here. They've made a couple of adjustments for Pocket. Again, similar to some of what we've seen throughout this patch, it seems to just be focused on quality of life improvements. They've done the same thing to Wraith as well. They've attempted once again to fix the inaccuracies of throwing out Wraith's teleports, saying that if it was done on uneven surfaces, it could cause a bug where it would actually leave you in the same place. Of course, pre-patch as well, before in the last update, they tried to fix it so it wouldn't have these sort of clipping issues anymore. Similarly, they've made a whole load of quality of life changes to the cloak for Pocket so that they're not going to run into these problems either. That's good news, and I hope it feels that way playing. Let's move on to Warden though and see just what they've done to this vigilante that wants to rid the world of all of this spirit nonsense. You know what they've done? They've reduced his base bullet damage down from 17.6 to 17, so wiping 0.6 of his base bullet damage off the table. It's gone, say goodbye. So again, a bit of a kneecap there to the gun damage ever so slightly, making these minor changes across the board. So many heroes having gun nerfs in this update. Let's have a look at the item changes instead then and move away from heroes into, of course, the itemization of Deadlock that plays such a big role. And the item changes in this patch are substantial. Firstly, cooldown reduction as a stat has been renamed to ability cooldown reduction and will no longer affect items at all. All CDR is now ability cooldown reduction only. To combat that, a new tier 4 6400 cost item was added called Transcendent Cooldown, giving you 4 out of combat regen and 30% cooldown reduction to abilities and item cooldown. So cooldown reduction as a whole has been overhauled inside of this patch. This is going to have a major effect on your builds and how you play the game. So wrap your head around that one and get out there so it doesn't negatively affect your gameplay. Talking of which, gameplay changes. Quite a few. I said this is quite a meta-defining update, and it really is, not only because of the changes I listed at the start of the video, but because of some of the ones that are still yet to come. Firstly, for one of the more minor changes, Valve made an undocumented change to the map and moved these boxes. Of course, these boxes I'm sure are quite infamous to most of you that play Deadlock. They were so sparse before, one in the middle, one on the left, one on the right, but very spread out. They've clumped them together, making it more enticing to actually break them, and I'm sure a lot of players will now actually smash those boxes to bits. I enjoy that. Right, let's have a look at some of the bigger changes then. Firstly, 300 soul boons will now give you an AP instead of an ability unlock, and the 600 soul boon now gives you an ability unlock instead of AP. So effectively what that means is you're going to get your second ability later in the game and get an ability point instead earlier. Alongside that, they've also made a change to the amount of spirit gained from leveling. That's been reduced from 1.25 to 1.11, so a bit of a change there that is going to affect you. There is some upsides as well, of course, like spirit bonus based on souls spent in the spirit tree in the shop has been increased by 25%. So there's a few good things, few bad things. Moving on from that and focusing on mid-boss, there's a whole load of buffs and adjustments here as well. Flat up, they've increased his base HP by 15%, made a change that the warning sound that plays is now going to be used at the 70% mark rather than the 60% HP mark, so giving that bait warning a bit earlier. Rejuve's drop duration's gone down by another second from last patch, so down from 8 to 7. Spirit resist from abilities has been reduced from 30% to 20%. Similarly, item resistance has also been reduced from 50% to 20%, so a crazy change there. Mid-boss all in all has had its bounty upped as well, and that's going to be evenly split among the team that kills the boss, regardless of the Rejuve secure. Rejuve troopers have also had their bonus health reduced, so that's going to be going down from 200, 230, 260 to 170, 200, 230, so a bit of a change over the course of the game there. Hell, we've even had so many adjustments to the overall objective resistances and HP inside of this patch. Walker spirit resist has gone down. That's been reduced by 5% from 30 to 25. So spirit damage on walkers is even more lucrative now. It was already pretty substantial last patch, but it keeps getting better. Guardian base resistance has been increased from 40% to 60%. That's going to decay at the 10-minute mark still, so same value as Creep previously. Guardian total bounty has been reduced from 1,650 to 1,000, so 650 taken off the top there, with Walker total bounty also going down from 4,500 to 3,500. Hell, even the zip lines have had some changes, with those express lines that kick in after destroying base guardians being even quicker now, up from 120 to 140, and the time it takes for them to ramp up going down by a single second as well, so down from 4 seconds to 3 seconds. So a lot more lucrative quick rotates off the back of killing the base guardians of the enemy and having express lines available. They've also upped the bounty on the small neutral creep camps. That's going to be your tier 1s, represented by the smaller little denizen that's on screen here. Of course, commonly the side camps that you'll find first in lane. Likewise, you've got, of course, the free stack on the Baroness if you're playing on Broadway. So a slight bounty increase there for those camps. Man, so many changes to dissect inside of this update. It's really interesting that Valve have decided to play around with a lot more balance outside of just what gives you flex slots. You know, normally in these recent updates, it's been flex slots, flex slots, flex slots, changing them constantly to try and see what either speeds up games or makes games more enjoyable. They're opting to go a completely different route with this balance update, and I'm leaning into it. I find it interesting. Let's see. It feels like this could be an amazing update for the game all in all. Maybe that's optimism. Maybe that's just based on some of the changes sounding quite interesting and feeling like they could have a cool knock-on effect to how Deadlock is played at the minute, but that's just my opinion. If you'd like to know what myself, Blank, Daisy, and all of us here at Dead Air think about the patch, keep it locked on our socials. Keep your ear to the ground with the podcast as well. That's going to be coming out every Saturday, give or take. Never missed an episode, honestly, have we? There's so much to dissect with this one, so definitely keep tuned in to Dead Air. Expect some shorts, expect some social content. Check it out on the Reddit as well. As always, I've been your host, Jacky Esports. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe. It really helps and motivates us to keep going, as this was quite a big edit. as you saw, it's a huge patch that took some time. Thanks for watching though. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the rest of the Dead Air content, and we will see you next time. I hope you enjoyed the 1-year anniversary of Patch Notice.